If you've ever driven along the smaller roads in Thailand, you have probably seen them. You know, piles of discarded things sitting quietly by the roadside. A broken fan, a cracked Buddha statue, or a faded photo frame with no picture inside. They're the kind of objects people can't throw away in the trash, but don't want in their homes either. Some call these spots the places for unwanted things. Others, they say they're where lost spirits settle, items abandoned by their owner, waiting for another to take them home. This story is about Namwan, a young office worker who moved to Nonthaburi, which is a small city next to Bangkok, Thailand, for a new job. She rented a narrow townhouse near the canal, simple, a little old, but more affordable. The first thing she noticed about the neighborhood was how quiet it was. Too quiet sometimes. The walls inside her homes were bare except for a single nail sticking out in the living room. She thought maybe she will hang a picture there someday. She just didn't expect that she would find one so soon. It was a Sunday afternoon after the rain. The road near her house still glistered with puddles, and the air smelled faintly of wet soil and grilled pork from a vendor nearby. That's when Namwan saw it. By the corner of the street, next to the pile of old furnitures, stood an upright painting, tall, wrapped in a thin wooden frame. Unlike everything else around it, it wasn't dirty or broken. It looked new. She walked closer. The painting showed a woman sitting under a tree by a river, her head tilted slightly, eyes lowered, wearing a soft blue traditional dress. It wasn't a print, it was real paint on canvas, with smooth strokes. Maybe it was done by an artist, very beautifully done. But what really stood out about the painting was how dry it was. Even though the ground was still wet from the rain, not a single drop touched the canvas. The colors were clean and framed unwrapped. Namwan glanced around. No one was nearby. The shop across the street was closed, and the only sound came from the hum of power lines overhead. Something about the painting just felt still, not cold or scary, just quiet, as if it didn't really belong to the noise of the world around it. She hesitated for a moment, and then she said to herself, almost laughing, "It's just a painting. I might as well give it a home." She carried it back to her townhouse, wiped the frame with a towel, and hung it on a single nail above the sofa in the living room. The painting filled the house perfectly, and for the first time, the house that she rented didn't feel empty. That night, the air was humid but still. Namwan left the windows open and the fan spinning on low. The faint smell of rain drifted in from the canal behind her house. She had cooked instant noodles for dinner and watched a rerun of a game show on TV. When she turned the TV off, the reflection of the painting shimmered faintly on the black screen. The woman in the picture seemed calm, her eyes soft, her hands resting on her lap under the tree. Namwan smiled. She liked how peaceful it looked. It made the room feel less lonely. Before going upstairs, she turned off the lights, and for a second, she thought she saw the painting catch a little light from the outside, like the surface was glowing faintly. She told herself it was just a passing motorcycle and went to bed. Around midnight that night, she woke up to the sound of barking. The neighbor's dog was howling somewhere down the alleyway. It was not unusual, but this time the sound was sharper, more like a panicked sound, almost as if the dog was frightened. She got up, walked to the window, and looked outside. The street was empty. Only the puddles reflected the dim orange of the streetlight. The barking stopped. The silence that followed felt heavy, as if the air itself was holding its breath. She decided to get a glass of water and went downstairs. The living room was dim, lit only by the light from the street outside. Her eyes landed on the painting. It looked exactly the same, but for some reason, the woman's expression seems different. The soft smile she remembered from earlier looked faintly straighter and her eyes darker. Namwan blinked and stepped closer. Maybe it was the lighting, maybe it was her imagination. The room was warm, yet she felt a slight chill crawled up her arms. She whispered softly, as if embarrassed to be talking to herself. "It's just a painting." Then she turned on the lamp. Under the brighter light, everything looked normal again. The smile was there. The colors were soft. She let out a quiet laugh, drank her water and turned the lamp off. Before heading back upstairs, she looked once more. The woman's eyes in the painting seemed to be looking a little higher than before, almost at the edge of the stairs that she was standing at. Over the next few days, life went on as usual. Namwan got used to her new routine: work during the day, dinner from the noodle shop nearby, and quiet evenings at home. The painting stayed right where she had hung it, and she stopped thinking about it at first. One evening, while video calling her friend from Chiang Mai, which is another city to the north of Thailand, the camera on her phone froze. The screen suddenly went gray and pixelated. Her friend's voice was still clear, but the video wouldn't unfreeze. When Namwan checked, the frame on the screen was stuck, showing her living room, with the painting right behind her. Her friend laughed. "Your background looks haunted. The woman in the painting feels like she's staring right at me." Namwan smiled awkwardly and changed the camera angle. The connection returned to normal, but the comment stayed in her mind. That night, before going to bed, she noticed something strange. The woman's posture in the painting looked slightly different. She used to sit straight with both hands on her lap. Now, one hand seems to rest beside her on the grass. The trees behind her looked darker and the shadow a little longer. She took a step back and squinted, trying to remember. Maybe she had just never looked closely before. She even took a photo with her phone just to compare later. The next morning, when she checked the photo, the picture of the colors were clear, but the woman's face in the picture was blurred. Only her eyes were visible, faint and smudged, as if the camera had caught them moving. Namwan deleted the photo and locked her phone, and for the rest of the day, she felt a dull unease sitting behind her ribs, the kind that comes when something feels off but you can't explain why. That night, she came home late from work. The living room light was still off, but she could still see the outline of the painting in the dim glow from the street. Something about it looked wrong. When she turned the light on, she saw it clearly. The frame was tilted slightly to the left, as if someone had touched it. The nail it hung from was still firm on the wall. Namwan straightened the frame, then stepped back. The woman in the painting was smiling again. Her eyes, calm and soft, were no longer looking down. They were looking forward. That night, the rain came again. It started softly, tapping against the window, then grew heavier until the sound filled the whole room. Namwan couldn't sleep. Around midnight, she heard a faint noise downstairs, a slow, uneven creak, like a floorboard shifting under someone's weight. She sat up and listened. The sound came again. She told herself it was just the wind or maybe water dripping from the ceiling. Still, she couldn't ignore it. After a few minutes, she got out of bed, took her phone for light and went downstairs. The house was quiet except for the rain outside. The air felt heavier than before and slightly damp, and then she noticed a thin trail of water on the floor leading towards the sofa. The painting hung above it just as before, but for some reason, the woman's face looked brighter than the rest of the picture, as if catching a glow that didn't exist in the room. Namwan stopped at the bottom of the stairs. Something inside her told her not to get closer, but she did it anyway. When she shone her phone light on the painting, the beam reflected off the surface of the glass. For a moment, she thought she saw something that didn't make sense. A second figure, faintly visible in the reflection behind the woman, tall, standing under the tree in the distance. She blinked, lowered the light, then raised it again. The figure was gone. Only the woman remained in the painting. Namwan took a deep breath, her hands shaking slightly. Her phone light flickered once before she turned it off. The air was still, but the faint smell of wet soil drifted through the room. She looked once more at the painting before heading upstairs. The woman's eye seemed to follow her steps until she reached the last stair. In her room, she closed the door and left the light on. For a long time, she couldn't sleep, but every time she blinked, she saw the reflection. That tall figure under the tree, standing just far enough to make her doubt what she had really seen. The next morning, Namwan felt exhausted. Her eyes were heavy from staying awake most of the night. She kept thinking about the painting and the faint second figure that she had seen in the painting. At work, she tried to brush it off. When her co-workers asked if she was alright, she said she just hadn't been sleeping well. By late afternoon, she decided to stop thinking about it altogether. After work, she went into a small grocery shop at the corner of her street. The shopkeeper was an older woman who always liked to chat. Namwan mentioned the painting casually while paying for her things. Namwan said she had found it earlier near the roadside and thought it was too beautiful to leave it there. The woman's smile faded slightly. She hesitated before speaking. She said, "You should be careful bringing home things that you find outside," she said softly. "Sometimes people leave them there because they do not want them anymore, and not everything that's left behind is just trash." Namwan laughed politely, but her chest felt tightened. The woman didn't smile back. That night, Namwan tried to ignore the painting. She kept the television on until late, hoping the noise would draw her thoughts away. When she finally turned it off, the house felt silent. She glanced towards the painting. The woman's eye seemed to catch the light from the street again, faint and soft. Namwan looked away and whispered to herself, "It's just a painting." She went upstairs. Around 3 in the morning, she woke up suddenly. It took her a second to realize why. There was movement downstairs. She sat up, holding her breath. It wasn't the sound of footsteps. It was softer, slower, almost like someone's hand brushing against the wall. She listened closely and the sound stopped. Then, faintly, she heard something else, a low hum. Her first thought was she had left the TV on, but she knew she had not. Gathering her courage, she went down the stairs. The room below was dark, but she could see the outline of the painting on the wall. The sound was coming from it. Not loud, but steady, like someone whispering behind the canvas. Namwan froze. Her heart pounded, but she couldn't move. Then the sound stopped completely. The silence that followed was thick, heavy, as if the whole room was holding its breath again. She took one step back, and then another, then turned off the light before going upstairs. Her legs trembled as she reached the bedroom door. She didn't notice until later that her feet had left a faint, wet footprints on the floor. By morning, Namwan had made up her mind. She couldn't keep it anymore. The memory of that sound from behind her canvas would not leave her. Even after sunrise, she kept glancing at the painting, half afraid that it might look different again. The woman in the picture seemed quiet, but her eyes were too clear, almost aware. Namwan waited until the afternoon until more people were outside. She took the painting down carefully, wrapped it in an old towel and carried it out to her car. She drove back to the same street where she had first found it. The pile of discarded things were still there, though smaller now. A broken chair, a few cracked tiles, and an old television. She leaned the painting gently against the telephone pole and stepped back. For a moment, she felt guilty, as if she were abandoning something that once belonged to her. Then she whispered, "I'm sorry," then walked away. That night, she came home feeling lighter. She turned on the TV and cooked dinner and finally felt she could relax. The house was quiet but not heavy anymore. She thought maybe it was finally over. Before bed, she locked the doors and turned off the lights. The air felt peaceful. For the first time in days, she slept soundly. Then, when she left for work the next morning, something stopped her at the front gate. There, leaning neatly against the fence, was the same painting. Clean, dry, and untouched. Not a single mark on the frame. The towel that she had wrapped it was gone. Namwan stood still for a long time, staring at it. The woman in the picture seems to be looking directly at her now, her faint smile gone. Her eyes were steady and calm, and almost alive. Namwan didn't touch the painting. She went back inside, locked the door, and sat on the floor, her hands shaking. Outside, the morning sun touched the frame, and the light on the woman's face looked almost real, like a warm skin. That night, the air felt strange. Not cold, not hot, just still. Even the canal behind the house was quiet. Namwan tried to go to sleep early, but her mind kept drifting to the painting. It was still in the living room, right where she had left it leaning against the wall. She told herself she would deal with it tomorrow. Around 2 in the morning, a sound woke her. A faint tapping, like someone knocking lightly on glass. At first, she thought it came from outside. Then she realized it was coming from downstairs. She sat up and listened. The tapping continued, slow and steady, in pairs. Tap, tap. Silence. And then tap, tap again. Her mouth went dry. She turned on her phone flashlight and walked quietly down the stairs. The beam cut across the empty room, and the sound stopped. The painting was standing upright again. It had been leaning flat against the wall earlier, but now it faced the sofa, perfectly centered. Namwan stared at it, unable to move. The woman in the picture looked the same, sitting under the tree, but her face seemed faintly turned, as if she was now looking towards the stairs. Namwan took a slow step closer. Her hand trembled as she reached to touch the frame. The surface was cold, colder than the air around it. She whispered softly, "I don't want you here anymore." Something shifted inside the house. Not a sound, not a movement, just a weight, like the air had grown heavier in that single moment. She stepped back, heart racing. Her phone light flickered, and for a second, she thought she saw a reflection on the glass. It looked like her own face standing behind the woman in the painting, blurred but real. The light steadied again, and it was gone. Namwan turned away and ran upstairs and locked her bedroom door. She left the light on until morning. When she came down at dawn, the painting was still there, standing quietly exactly where it had been. The room smelled faintly of wet earth and old paint. She didn't eat breakfast. She packed her clothes, grabbed her documents, and called her landlord. She said she was moving out early and that he could keep the deposit. A week later, the house was empty. Namwan had moved out and without telling anyone much about why. The landlord found a key under the mat and a short note on the counter. It simply said, "Please leave everything as it is." When he walked inside, the house felt untouched, as if someone had just stepped out for groceries. The curtains were drawn and the fan cord still hung from the ceiling. In the living room, the painting stood quietly against the wall. He almost took it down, but something about it made him pause. The colors were still vivid, not fainted by time or heat. There was no artist's signature, no price tag or sticker from the gallery, nothing to show where it had came from or who had painted. He decided to leave it there. No one ever found out who the woman in the picture was or why the painting had been left by the roadside that day. Some said it belonged to a house that burned down nearby. Others say it just appeared one morning after the storm. Whatever the truth is, the painting still hangs there today in the same quiet living room, perfectly dry, no matter how hard it rains outside. And that is the end of the story. There are always piles of abandoned things on the side of the road in Thailand. You will start to notice when you go out of the cities, where skylines turn into rice field, where you will eventually see there are multiple spots where people just throw away their things. Sometimes it can include old things such as TVs, shoes, or used chairs. Sometimes you will see strange things, such as the statue of a dancer or a shrine that no one uses anymore. And that's when you know it's better not to touch or bring anything home if it's not belongs to you. And I hope you guys enjoy this story. I will see you all in the next story. Bye.